Hello, YouTubers. Boy, do I have news for you. It's been stacking up here. I thought I better do a special edition and pump some of this out to you so you know what's going on. This one is just about everything on Hillary. My goodness gracious. She just stays in the news, and so little of it is, well, nothing of it is good. My goodness. It's one of them shame, everybody knows your name deals. We'll just jump right on into it, and I'll start telling you about this stuff here. The first one that I have here is off of Hagman Report, and it says evidence that the silencing of Assange connects directly to the Clinton camp. Like we didn't already know that, but it's nice to see that they're reporting it somewhere in the news. I don't think you'll see it on mainstream, but hey, that's why we're here, huh? Fingerprints of fabrication, more effective than drone strike exposing the anatomy of a takedown. Julian Assange, the man behind WikiLeaks and a threat to the criminal cabal of globalists working inside of the U.S. government, is the subject of multiple investigations, including two most recent, extremely serious and very curiously timed charges. In fact, it is suggested that these charges served, at least in part, as the basis for Assange's recently losing his internet access. A press release dated 18th of October 2016 from WikiLeaks details the charges, summarized as follows. An unknown entity posing as an internet dating agency prepared an elaborate plot to falsely claim that Julian Assange received 1 million US dollars from the Russian government, and a second plot to frame him sexually molesting an 8-year-old girl. Both are heavy-duty accusations, to be sure. Especially within prison system, well, except for some Middle Eastern countries, pedophiles do not fare well. Mere accusations are often sufficient to make one very poor life insurance risk. Accusations of espionage, including and especially such levels of enrichment, can also be a death sentence. Why not just drone the guy, one might ask? Well, that could work too. However, the mere stigma from accusations of espionage and pedophilia might well be considered the daily double of professional extermination without the property destruction and bloodshed. Such charges are far more convenient and effective than a drone strike, and no tears are shed for such societal dredge. As an added benefit, there's a whole lot less explaining that needs to be done. It is important to note here that the American public has been inundated with accusations that the nation state of Russia is behind the Podesta and DNC hacks. Recall that Hillary Clinton asserts that all of our intelligence agencies are pointing to Russia as the culprits behind the digital break-ins involving Assange by association with a Russian operation. How utterly convenient, then, to see charges levied against Assange that he is the intended recipient of $1 million. For the mindless spectators listening to the media pundits, case closed. Thinkers among us, not so fast. Neutralizing Assange from the pages of the Benghazi cover-up playbook. While scrutinizing the accusations against Assange, I sensed something very familiar about the origins of the claims against him. In fact, it was reminiscent of the attacks in Benghazi, which I've investigated and written about extensively, where the blame was attributed to an obscure internet video produced and uploaded to the internet by an equally obscure individual. Stated differently, I've seen this same template or identical method of operation before. In that instance, the origin of the video appeared to have been birthed by factions within the U.S. government itself and by individuals working or peripherally at that time to the Central Intelligence Agency and related organizations. Now, this possessing many of the same characteristics related to Benghazi, it appears to have been copied from the same playbook. In the case of Benghazi, Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State and had a working relationship with the CIA and former and current national security advisors. They wrote the playbook and used it to mitigate the public relations disaster that would accompany allegations of weapons smuggling through the CIA compound in Benghazi. With regard to the Benghazi attack, I was clear that all was not what it appeared. Now, with regard to the charges against Assange, my investigation revealed that all is not what it appears. It is, in fact, worse. If proven correct, the charges are not only spurious, but can be traced to political operatives inside the inner circle of Hillary Clinton campaign and, equally important, intelligence operatives within that same circle. Simply put, Hillary Clinton, along with her inner circle of political and intelligence operatives, appear to be present at the epicenter of both the Benghazi cover-up and the Assange accusations. I do not write this lightly and understand the implications by publishing my analysis. I am therefore relieved upon finding the research of citizen journalists posting to Reddit who appear to be arriving at similar conclusions. It was during my broadcast last evening when a listener sent me the link to the same Reddit thread I found earlier, giving me a bit of comfort knowing that others are beginning to take notice. I must fully credit the poster at Reddit, some great investigators based on their thoroughness and persistence. The cyber unit at the FBI would do well to pay attention, for there are some very talented cyber sleuths who I would gladly welcome into my organization given their abilities and tenacity. Most of the so-called journalists of today could not find their way home with a map and a GPS, but I digress. Fully documented investigative report would span many pages and contain numerous endnotes serving as exhibits logged into evidence. For the sake of space and time, I'll provide a simple overview of general analysis based on my extensive research and investigation. Central to the charges against Assange and a company identified as toddandclaire.com, an online dating site that reportedly offered Julian Assange through his attorney of record $1 million for his participation in a video ad for their company. The money, it was alleged, would come from Russian government and was initially made on or about 15th of September 2016. The Assange legal team obtains information about this entity, responding that it appeared to be an elaborate ruse to entrap Assange. Follow-up emails, ostensibly from that same entity, pose an October 31st, 2016 deadline regarding their original offer, although containing certain characteristics of those emails suggest something more nefarious is taking place. It is critical to note that the odd timing of this offer corresponds with WikiLeaks obtaining the yet unreleased Podesta emails. On October 4th of 2016, the same day of Assange's press conference where he was expected to disclose serious revelations involving the Clinton campaign, that same entity, Todd and Claire, a participant in the United Nations Global Compact program known as KATIA, a screening project to protect women from online predators, apparently filed a report against Assange for the alleged online sexual molestation of an 8-year-old girl. Again, it is critical to understand the timing of the actions referenced. 3 days later, WikiLeaks begins the incremental release of the Podesta emails. As the news of the serious allegations made against Assange were made public, citizen journalists and amateur investigators posting to Reddit began their efforts to uncover who is behind the entity known as Todd and Claire. The findings posted on Reddit generally corresponded with my investigation being conducted in-house with a few minor and inconsequential differences. What was discovered and published on Reddit and found through my use of proprietary databases that restrict access to approved investigative agencies is a relationship between Todd and Claire and certain staff members of the database aggregator, Trends Analyzer, and global think tank identified as the Premise Data Corporation. The Premise Data Corporation is a highly praised and well-connected company whose co-founder is identified as David Soloff. Mr. Soloff happens to be a friend of Hillary Clinton, and it seems and is seen in pictures on social networking sites posing with Hillary Clinton. In addition, Larry Summers is listed as being on the board of directors at the Premise Data Corporation. Summers is also associated with Center for American Progress, which was founded by Hillary Clinton's campaign chairman, John Podesta. So there you have it. Exposed are the latent digital fingerprints of fabrication and connected to the Clinton cabal, not Russia. There is more, but this should be sufficient to see that things are not what they appear. The next article that I have for you is off of strategicculture.org. This one is entitled Hillary's War Crime. Today, October the 20th, 2016, so this article is 2 days old, is the 5th anniversary of the murder of Muammar Gaddafi by forces organized and unleashed by the U.S. President Obama and Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. Remember the killer bitch's performance with gleeful laughter on CBS News. We came, we saw, he died. Muammar Gaddafi was the most progressive political leader in the world. Gaddafi used Libya's oil wealth for the benefit of the Libyan people. He lived in a tent, a nice tent, but not a palace, and he did not have collections of European exotic cars or any of the other paraphernalia associated with ruling families in Saudi Arabia and the oil emirates that are Washington's Middle Eastern allies. In Libya, education, medical treatment, and electricity were free. Gasoline was practically free, selling for 14 US cents. Women who gave birth were supported with cash grants, and couples received cash grants upon marriage. Libya's state bank provided loans without interest and provided free startup capital to farmers. Gaddafi's independence from Washington is what brought him down. Earlier in life, Gaddafi's goal was to organize Arabs as a bloc that could withstand Western depredations. Frustrated, he turned to Pan-Africanism and refused to join the U.S. African Command. He wanted to introduce a gold-based African currency that would free Africans from American financial hegemony. Gaddafi had Chinese energy companies developing Libya's energy resources. Washington, already upset with Russia's presence in the Mediterranean, was now faced with Chinese presence as well. Washington concluded that Gaddafi was playing ball with the wrong people and that he had to go. Washington organized mercenaries, termed them rebels, as in Syria, and sicked them on Libya. When it became clear that Gaddafi's forces would prevail, Washington tricked naive and gullible Russian and Chinese governments and secured a zone over Libya to be enforced by NATO. The express purpose of the no-fly zone was to prevent Gaddafi from attacking civilian targets, which he was not doing. The real reason was to prevent a sovereign state from using its own airspace so that the Libyan Air Force could not support the troops on the ground. Once the gullible Russians and Chinese failed to veto the Security Council's action, the U.S. and NATO themselves violated the resolution by using Western air power to attack Gaddafi's forces, thus throwing the conflict to the CIA organized mercenaries. Gaddafi was captured and brutally murdered. Ever since, Libya, formerly a prosperous and successful society, has been in chaos, which is where the Obama regime wanted it. All sorts of lies were told about Gaddafi and Libya, just as lies were told about Saddam Hussein and are told today about Syria and Russia. The report concluded mercy. Unambiguously, there we go, that the Russian people were fed by their governments in order to gain acceptance for the destruction of Libya, and that Libya was destroyed because Gaddafi was regarded as an obstacle to Western hegemony. Note that none of the prostitutes have asked the killer bitch about her guilt under the Nuremberg laws prepared on her watch. Note that the oligarchs have their own killer bitch, and their press prostitutes intend to make this war criminal the next president of the United States. Next article we have is off BizPack Review, and it says, now we know how damning the Hillary email was. Kennedy was trying to bribe the FBI to Deep Six. More details have emerged about the backroom allegations under Secretary Patrick Kennedy tried to convince the FBI to change the classification of an email discovered on Hillary Clinton's private unsecured server to include identifying the email at the center of the so-called quid pro quo arrangement. Catherine Herridge reported that a 2012 email from Clinton about suspects in the Benghazi attack was an email in question, as seen in the video clip posted online by the House Oversight and Government Reform Committee. And this video is in this article if you want to take a look at it. All of these URLs are in the description of the video, so you can take a look at them and see the videos and stuff that's included in them. So yeah, this goes on and it says Juan Williams tries to protect Hillary from criminal accusations, but makes things hilariously worse. Oversight Committee Chairman Jason Chavez and House Intelligence Committee Chairman Devin Nunes released a statement on Monday calling the immediate removal of Undersecretary Patrick Kennedy and an investigation into the misconduct. We find Undersecretary Kennedy's actions extremely disturbing, the Republican lawmaker said. Those who receive classified intelligence should not barter in it. That is reckless behavior with our nation's secrets. Someone who would try to get classification marking doctored should not continue serving as State Department or retain access to classified information. Therefore, President Obama and Secretary Kerry should immediately remove Undersecretary Kennedy's pending and full investigation. So there you have that article. The next one I have for you is off of BizPack Review, and it says Hillary Clinton made a PSA on cybersecurity. See what she said to State Department employees. Hillary Clinton is seen in a newly obtained video lecturing her State Department staff to do exactly what she was not doing herself. The 2010 video, which was obtained by FoxNews.com, shows then Secretary of State Clinton warning staff about cybersecurity attacks and their special duty to protect against them. Is in this article if you want to take a look at that at your leisure. It says here she says the real key to cybersecurity rests with you. Complying with the department computing policies and being alert to potential threats will help protect all of us. That's her quote. Clinton delivered the video message pointing to the important work the State Department Bureau of Diplomatic Security and IT departments do to guard against attacks at a time when she was using private email server to conduct State Department business. Examples of types of cyber attacks and how systems can be hacked, directing the staffers to log into the internal cybersecurity awareness website or subscribe to the cybersecurity awareness newsletter. Cyber infrastructure and digital networks has to be a matter of national security, she said. I think this is a responsibility that we all share as Americans, but as State Department employees, we have a special duty to guard ourselves and our sensitive information, unquote. Clinton directed staffers to follow the policies and practices she herself apparently did not. Hillary Clinton needs only to look into the mirror to find the biggest cybersecurity risk, House Oversight and Government Reform Committee Chairman Jason Chavez told FoxNews.com. Clinton spokesman Brian Fallon said these types of warnings were more than appropriate at the time. Mercy. The next one we have here is off of conservativetribune.com. Congress to launch investigation on State Department's officials' pay-to-play scheme. And this one says State Department Undersecretary for Management Patrick Kennedy has been called upon by the House Committee on Oversight and Government Reform to resign immediately, pending a full investigation into his interaction with FBI during its investigation into former Secretary Hillary Clinton's private email server. The FBI notes on the Clinton email investigation released on Monday suggested that Kennedy pressured the FBI to change the classification of certain emails on Clinton's server to something less damning, according to the Daily Caller. Allegedly, the FBI found his pressure to be evidence that the State Department was moving to protect its former head. Oversight Chairman Jason Chavez and the House Intelligence Committee Chairman Devin Nunes sent two emails, one to Secretary of State John Kerry and one to Department Inspector General Steve Linick, asking for an independent investigation into the department for apparent abuse of power by senior State Department personnel trying to influence classification determinations for emails sent and received by Secretary Clinton. The letters even referenced a shadow government. Those who receive classified intelligence should not barter in it, read the letter. That is reckless behavior with our nation's secrets. Someone who would try to get classification marking doctored should not continue serving in the State Department or retain access to classified information. Therefore, President Obama and Secretary Kerry should immediately remove Undersecretary Kennedy pending a full investigation, the letter continued. It is impossible to imagine what would happen to the campaign of GOP nominee Donald Trump if such a scandal were to emerge involving someone in his camp. Well, actually, it is possible. However, since this is about Hillary Clinton, it will likely be largely ignored by mainstream media. Abuse of classified information warrants the removal of access to classified information for the future. Normally, anyway, not for Hillary Clinton. It's her turn, after all. That's how that one reads. The next one is off of Breitbart.com, and this one says, woman backtracks on assault claim after O'Keefe video. It says, woman who accused Donald Trump supporter of punching her outside a Trump rally in North Carolina is backtracking after James O'Keefe and Project Veritas released a video showing Democrat operatives claiming she was a trained activist. 69-year-old Shirley Teeter of Asheville now says it is possible that 73-year-old Richard L. Campbell merely touched her accidentally, as his attorney had claimed all along. Originally, Harris told local ABC News affiliate WLOS, he stopped in his tracks and he turned around and just cold-cocked me. She also added a pointed rhetorical question, namely whether people find a Trump supporter punching her in the face deplorable. Now, however, Teeter is changing her story rather dramatically. She told WLOS on Wednesday that it is possible he could have struck her with his backhand. O'Keefe's undercover video showed Democracy Partners consultant Scott Foble, who has since been fired, claiming that Teeter was just trained political activist. WLOS reports that Teeter vehemently denied being involved in any way with any person, group, or organization, political or otherwise. She did admit having volunteered on Barack Obama's 2008 presidential campaign. As a result of Teeter's initial accusation, police in Nashville issued a warrant for Campbell's arrest, and his name was dragged through the mud nationwide for the simple act of attending a political rally. Facebook video of the altercation shows Campbell, who suffers poor vision as a result of cataracts, being led through a gauntlet of anti-Trump protesters by his wife. In the video, Teeter then follows Campbell and appears to reach for his shoulder. His attorney told Breitbart News that he turned around after being touched and Teeter then fell down. She showed no visible sign of injury to her face in the photographs and interviews that followed the incident. Democracy Partners co-founder Robert Creamer has resigned from his work with the Hillary Clinton campaign as a result of O'Keefe's expose. So there you have that article. Next one is also off of Breitbart.com, and this one says, WikiLeaks, Podesta's daughter received his shares in Putin-linked company. An email uncovered in WikiLeaks hacks reveals that Hillary Clinton's campaign chairman, John Podesta, his 75,000 common shares obtained from his membership on the executive board of an energy company, Jolie Unlimited, which receives millions from Putin-connected Russian government fund, were transferred to his daughter, Megan Rose. Full transfer request with Megan's signature attached, Podesta's assistant Aaron Sepp wrote to him. A January 3rd, 2014 letter revealed that Podesta designated his daughter's Dublin, California residence as the address for Lanido Holding LLC, the Delaware-based holding company that Podesta used to transfer his shares in Russian-related Jolay Global Holdings. Rose is listed as managing member of Lanido Holding LLC, according to financial documents. Podesta's membership on the board of directors of Jolay Limited was first revealed in research from Breitbart News senior editor at large and Government Accountability Institute GAI president Peter Schweitzer. The GAI report titled From Russia with Money, Hillary Clinton, the Russian Reset, and Cronyism reported that Podesta joined the Jolay Unlimited board in June of 2011. 2 months after Podesta joined the board, Vladimir Putin Rosano announced that it would invest up to 1 billion rubles into Jolay Unlimited, which amounted to $35 million. That represents 1/5 of the entire amount of investment dollars Jolay collected from 2007 to 2013. The GAI report concludes. As Breitbart News previously reported, Sepp forwarded a message concerning the Jolay shares to Podesta from Mark C. Solakana, or Solakina, I don't know how you pronounce this. Solakina, I don't know, was senior vice president at general counsel at Jolay Unlimited Technologies Incorporated. It is my understanding that John transferred the resulting 75,000 common shares from the option exercise to the Leonardo LLC. He wrote in a January 2014 email, as such, we would need to edit the transfer of share agreements to reflect the transfer of 75,000 common shares to the LLC. Podesta also failed to disclose fully his position on Jolay's Unlimited board of directors and to include it in his federal financial disclosures as required by law before he became President Barack Obama's senior advisor in January of 2014. Last week, Donald Trump's presidential campaign senior communications advisor Jason Miller demanded that Podesta either explain his connection to Jolay or resign as Clinton's campaign chairman. The disclosure that Clinton chair John Podesta transferred his shares in Putin-backed Jolay Unlimited to an anonymous holding company when he joined the Obama administration is extremely concerning, Miller said in a statement. Because the holding company is completely anonymous, we do not know whether or not he is still has deep financial ties to Vladimir Putin and his regime. Miller's statement continued. As such, Mr. Podesta needs to either reveal who is behind the holding company or he must resign from the Clinton campaign immediately. Podesta has yet to commit publicly on his involvement with Jolay Unlimited. The next one we have is off of viralliberty.com. It says bankers want Hillary Clinton to impose a tax on the American people to support Wall Street liquidity. A week ago, I wrote an article on how fascism had integrated itself into the U.S. government, and where a WikiLeaks dissemination, we found out that Citibank had given a list to incoming President Barack Obama on who to assign to his cabinet, and as expected, many of these suggestions were implemented. But as we head towards the election of a new president in less than 3 weeks, an interesting op-ed by one of the largest Wall Street hedge funds suddenly takes this new role of fascism that was primarily used in a guidance stage to a completely new level, as the COO of BlackRock is now calling for a tax on all Americans that would go directly to Wall Street and provide them unending liquidity to keep propping up their stocks and speculation. David Sirota just penned a very important and interesting article zeroing in on Wall Street, or on how Wall Street is maneuvering to propose and implement a new retirement tax on Americans under a Hillary Clinton administration, leading to the leading the charge is billionaire financial oligarch Tony James, who is COO of private equity giant Blackstone. Mr. James is a generous contributor to Hillary Clinton's presidential run and is listed as a Hillblazer by her campaign for having raised at least $100,000 toward her candidacy. While many Americans already know that much or most all of you will be totally unaware of his aggressive plan to force a 3% payroll tax on the public, which will be immediately funneled to Wall Street management firms, including alternative managers such as hedge funds and private equity. It seems like a very bizarre time to initiate such a proposal, considering many public pension funds are actively ditching alternative managers after realizing they've been paying extraordinarily high fees for pitiful performance. In other words, they've been ripped off. Wall Street, as well as central banks, know the financial jig is up and have been conducting monetary policies over the past 8 years to siphon wealth from the people into its hands of the 1%. And it appears that scheme is finally coming to a head, which is more and more people wake up to the fact that what they thought was wealth protection under the laws of the government was in fact a mirage that masked the reality that their pension funds, saving accounts, and nearly all of their money has not only been at risk, but has slowly been taken through mechanisms like ZIRP and price inflation. In 2010, former Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi proposed a bill that would have taken everyone's 401ks, IRAs, and mutual funds and moved them into a government-controlled fund that would have promised 3% annual return. Then, a few years later, President Obama created a similar scheme known as MIRA, which tried to deceive people into investing in U.S. debt rather than in tangible assets. And now the banks and hedge funds that realize the system is collapsing are looking to Hillary Clinton to achieve their own theft of the American people. And since Congress holds the power to tax populists into oblivion, it is not out of the realm of possibility that these bought and paid for tools would pass such a bill. The next article I have is off BizPack Review. It says Obama claimed he found out about Hillary's private server in the news. WikiLeaks shows otherwise. Surprise or not? It seems President Obama knew all along Hillary Clinton was using a private server and email address during her tenure as Secretary of State, even though he claims otherwise. New emails released by WikiLeaks revealed that Obama lied about his secret communications with Clinton when he told CBS Bill Plante on March 7th of 2015 that he found out about her private account and server the same time everybody else learned it through news reports. Clinton aide Philippi Reines flagged the president's troubling response in a 2015 email exchange with other top Clinton aides and White House Communications Director Jennifer Palmieri. In the email with subject line, Obama says he didn't know Hillary Clinton was using private email address, NewYorkTimes.com. Reines reacted to a New York Times story that referred to the CBS interview. One of us should connect with the White House just so they know that the email will show his statement not to make sense, Reines wrote. It's not unreasonable to assume that Josh Earnest is going to get asked how this was possible, and he should have the fact set. Palmieri responded that it was standard practice at the White House not to confirm anything about the president's email. They know POTUS and HRC emailed. Josh had been asked about that. Standard practice is not to confirm anything about his email, so his answer to the press was that he would not comment or confirm, she wrote. Okay, sounds like people are putting words in his mouth, Reines replied. Says the latest WikiLeaks email released appears to be more evidence that Obama knew about Clinton's use of the private server and email account. President even used Swedem in his communications with the former Secretary of State. And there's all kinds of tweets and stuff in this if you want to read those on, what was tweeted back and forth between everybody. pretty much everything I just read you. The next one that we have here is off of BizPac Review, and it says, uh-oh, it's a surprise in store for Tim Kaine and Donna Brazile. Grab your popcorn and hold on. WikiLeaks teased an undisclosed surprise coming for Democratic Vice Presidential nominee Tim Kaine and interim Democratic National Committee Chairman Donna Brazile. And the tweet says, we have a surprise in store for Tim Kaine and Donna Brazile. It says no other details have emerged, but Twitter users were pretty excited. And there's all kinds of tweets here from people about it. They even have some some videos in these tweets, and that goes on all the way down the page, so you can take a look at all those and have yourself a chuckle if you want to. The next one is off Natural News, and it says if Hillary Clinton seizes the White House, it will be an illegitimate, null and void theft of power, democracy democracy obliterated, America a failed state. A little over 2 weeks, we're going to find out whether we have a country anymore. If Hillary Clinton seizes the White House, she'll preside over an illegitimate, illegal dictatorship that was seized through massive fraud, collusion, and corruption at every level. Without all the fraud, collusion, and corruption, Hillary Clinton would have been indicted for criminal violations of national security. She'd be down 20 points in the polls, and the media wouldn't be covering up all of her crimes and failures. Without the collusion, Hillary Clinton wouldn't have known all the TV debate questions ahead of time. The voter panels wouldn't have been coached by Clinton operatives to regurgitate rehearsed comments, and the official media polls wouldn't have been rigged to construct the appearance of widespread Clinton support. Every element of this election is so rigged, so illegal, and so fraudulent that if Hillary Clinton wins this vote, the presidency of the United States will be null and void. As WikiLeaks accurately states in this tweet, there is no U.S. election. There is power consolidation, rigged primary, rigged media, rigged Pied Piper candidate drive consolidation. And it actually shows the tweet here if you want to see it for yourself. It says, sadly, it's difficult to disagree with the assessment adds zero hedge that an establishment Democratic candidate could endure the extended FBI investigation in which multiple federal laws were clearly and intentionally broken, and clear evidence of corruption and collusion between the FBI and the State Department is mind-boggling. Throw in evidence from WikiLeaks clearly linking the DNC to criminal efforts to incite violence at rallies, numerous examples of pay-to-play activities at the Clinton Foundation, blatant media collusion, etc., and it actually becomes quite frightening. Donald Trump should reject the results of fraudulent stolen election. All this explains why Donald Trump should openly and firmly reject the results of a fraudulent election. It is not anti-democratic to do so, by the way. And when your opponent despises democracy and has rigged the entire election from the start to obliterate democratic principles. What's clear right now is that Democrats hate democracy. They despise free and fair election because they don't trust the voters to elect Democrats unless massive fraud is involved. This demonstrates, by the way, just how much the Democrats know their own leaders are hated by the voters. It's also why Democrats can never run for office by telling the truth of what they plan to do. Case in point, Hillary's ridiculous claim that she will not add a penny to the national debt. White House and put Hillary Clinton in power, Democrats have abandoned every principle of fair elections, invoking a win at all cost strategy that thrusts their party leaders and operatives into the category of lawless tyrants and third world dictators running a criminal regime. To Democrats, laws don't matter. Fairness doesn't matter. Even democracy doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is seizing power by any means, even if it involves hiring people to violently assault at rallies. See ProjectVeritasAction.com for video footage, or colluding with the head of FBI to avoid the criminal prosecution of their nominee. As Swillen Duke writes in the New American should or no, Trump should not accept the results of a possibly stolen election. Reality number one, there's voter fraud. Reality number two, since there's voter fraud, it's possible an election, especially a close one, could be stolen. Yet the three little monkey coward cons think that somehow it's noble and healthy to view possibly stolen election and say, nothing to see here, move along. Maybe if we pretend hard enough, everything will be okay. Until Hillary Clinton, James Comey, Loretta Lynch, Bill Clinton, and other corrupt Democrat operatives are behind bars, America does not have a legitimate federal government. One of the very best reasons to vote for Donald Trump, and perhaps the most important reason of all, is because he promises to seek criminal investigations of the most lawless operatives of the Obama and Clinton regime. Until America drains the swamp and wrests the criminal slag out of the halls of power in Washington, D.C., we cannot move forward as a nation that claims to respect the law. The outrageous lawlessness of the Clintons and the entire Democrat establishment must be brought to an end by we the people. If it cannot be brought to an end at the ballot box, I have no doubt that concerned citizens will find other ways to take back their country from the criminals in Washington. Right now, voting for Donald Trump is the last and best hope to prevent America from being seized by criminal cabal of deep corruption and runaway lawlessness that has infected every institution in our nation across every branch of government. Should this effort be thwarted by a criminal conspiracy of the Clintons, the media, the FBI, the DOJ, and other co-conspirators involved in all this, America ceases to become a nation of law and plunges into third world dictatorship status with all the obvious ramifications that follow such political corruption. Beware of the intense destructive evil that will fester out of power centralized political establishment which realizes it is above the law. As Hillary Clinton seizes the White House, the message to all the elite leftist power brokers will be obvious. We can get away with anything. They will realize they can commit any crime they want, and the media will cover up their crimes while the FBI excuses their actions with contorted legal immunities and whitewashed explanations. They will be above the law, and they will know that they control every institution in government effectively, granting themselves absolute power and absolute immunity. When in the history of the world has the concentration of absolute power into the hands of the few ever turned out well for the populace? It is vast understatement to remind you that this is the most dangerous time in the entire history of our nation since the American Revolution. Once the Democrats realize they have absolute power with zero accountability, there will be death squads to seek out and murder their political opponents. Websites critical of the Clintons regime will be seized and silenced. People who speak out against the regime will find themselves indicted by the IRS or investigated by the FTC, arrested by the DEA after drugs are planted in their homes. What the Obama regime has already done to Julian Assange, the Clinton regime will do to Rush Limbaugh, Michael Savage, Alex Jones, and Sean Hannity. The prisons will be filled with political enemies of the regime in power, and then to clear out the prisons, the mass murders will begin. Piece by piece, the corrupt Democrats will become the Fourth Reich, murdering their political enemies, demanding absolute obedience, PC thought control, raising their rhetoric to levels of psychological insanity that haven't been witnessed since the days of Adolf Hitler. And sometime during all of this, the armed American people will realize they have nothing more to lose, and they will almost certainly pick up their rifles, march on Washington, and lay it all on the line to either take back their country or die trying. Because in a society where the Second Amendment still lives, it only takes about 1% of the population to take their country back from a corrupt criminal regime. The only good news in all this is that Democrats hate firearms, which means they won't be able to put up much of a fight if all this plunges into kinetic action. In other words, if America dissolves into shooting war, open revolution, or armed revolt, there's no question that gun owners win. Why do you think Obama and the Clintons have been desperately trying to take away guns from all the citizens? And why do you think that all the talk about gun control never suggests the government itself should be disarmed? No gun control isn't about reducing gun violence. It's about monopolizing the power of gun violence into the hands of the corrupt government regime so that the citizens are defenseless and so much easier to round up, imprison, or execute. Read your history, folks. If you don't learn from it, you're doomed to repeat it. Every time corrupt regimes concentrate power into the hands of the criminal few, it ends up genocide or bloodshed. Hillary Clinton is thrusting America into a future of intense pain, suffering, and death. Remember all this as you cast your vote on November the 8th. The next one that we have for you is of the Washington Times. Hillary Clinton embraces George Soros's radical vision of open border world. Hillary Clinton has aligned herself closely with the vision for America laid out by her benefactor, left-wing financier George Soros, who talks of international governance, more open borders, increased Muslim immigration, and diminished U.S. global power. The phrase American exceptionalism is not part of his agenda. He wrote in 1998, the sovereignty of states must be subordinated to international law and international institutions. We need some global system of political decision making. In short, we need a global society to support our global economy, Mr. Soros wrote. After the September 11, 2001 Al Qaeda attacks on New York City and the Pentagon, he said, military power is of limited use in dealing with asymmetric threats such as terrorism. The Clinton Soros symbiosis came into clear focus this month with WikiLeaks' release of thousands of hacked emails from John Podesta, Mrs. Clinton's campaign chairman. Mr. Soros' name comes up nearly 60 times. Okay. And it says the financial and ideological alliance is so complete that after Mr. Soros dined with Mrs. Clinton in 2014 and asked her to attend Liberal Group's fundraiser, her campaign manager, Robbie Mook, wrote in an email, I would only do this for political reasons, such as to make Soros happy. Republican Duncan Hunter, the Californian Republican who is co-chairman of Donald Trump's Congressional Leadership Caucus, said a vote for Mrs. Clinton is a vote for the Soros agenda. The fact that Hillary Clinton and her campaign are so closely aligned with George Soros and his radical agenda is serious cause for alarm, Mr. Hunter told the Washington Times. Publicly, it's a relationship she's never really talked up, but communications at least now reveal how closely aligned they are, and Americans deserve to know that a Clinton presidency means even more direct influence from George Soros. And as for an agenda, there's probably won't be much daylight between the two. The Americans should be concerned that a vote for Clinton is no different than a vote for George Soros for president. The Times reached out to the press offices for Mr. Soros and Mrs. Clinton, but received no reply. With a Forbes pegged fortune of $24 billion, Mr. Soros is America's and the world's most prominent financial star in a constellation of liberal activist groups. They have funded anti-police protests, some of them violent, rhetorical attacks on conservatives and their media, open border initiatives, and efforts to control journalist reporting. The Hungarian US-born the Hungarian-born U.S. citizen grew up even closer to Bill and Hillary Clinton after Mr. Clinton became president, all while funding millions of dollars to their campaigns and to those of other Democrats. I do know. Try this again. I do now have great access in the Clinton administration, Mr. Soros told PBS in 1995. There's no question about this. We actually work together as a team. Mr. Soros has donated nearly $11 million to Hillary Clinton's Democratic presidential campaign and three main super PACs, USA Action, American Bridge, 21st Century, and Hillary for America, according to an analysis by the Washington Times. His foundation has given up to $6 million to the Clinton Foundation, the global charity the Clintons set up that has proved to be a good networking tool to obtain paid speaking engagements. The Clintons have a personal net worth of $100 million to $150 million, most of it gained by giving speeches to bankers, corporations, colleges, and trade associations. Mr. Soros pumps money into a list of who's who on the American left. They include Media Matters, MoveOn.org, which organized aggressive protests at Trump rallies, and the Center for American Progress, founded by Mr. Podesta. Educate future journalists also take Mr. Soros's money. A review of Mrs. Clinton's private and public comments shows she has very much absorbed Mr. Soros's grand plan for the world, a blueprint that hangs under the title Open Societies. His New York-based Open Societies Foundation is the center of his philanthropy and politics. Mr. Soros has complained of national borders as an impediment to world ruling bodies. At least 7 groups in the U.S. that promote open borders and mass immigration, according to the book Shadow Party by David Horowitz and Richard Poe. WikiLeaks has massive release of hacked campaign emails shows that in one of Mrs. Clinton's paid speeches to bankers, she pledged to work for open borders. Her dream presumably means that the southern U.S. border would be a conduit for untold numbers of immigrants. My dream is a hemispheric common market with open trade and open borders, she told a closed-door audience at the Brazilian Banco Tal in May of 2013, illustrating how far Mrs. Clinton has moved to the Soros position is a 2003 statement in which she said she was adamantly opposed to illegal immigrants. Conservative bloggers say one of Mr. Podesta's emails shows him explaining how illegal immigrants can vote by obtaining driver's license and attesting to U.S. citizenship at the polls. Non-citizen voting in federal elections is against the U.S. law. Mr. Soros is a big proponent of bringing more Muslims into Europe and, by extension, to America. He views Muslim immigrants as a savior for Europe because of the continent's low birth rate. He has funded private groups helping Muslims enter Germany and other countries, and he wants Europe to borrow billions of dollars to pay for resettling them. He wrote in the Australian newspaper last year that Europe should bring in $1 million Muslim refugees per year for the foreseeable future. Hungary built walls to keep out Middle Eastern refugees, fearing they would turn the country from its Christian roots into an Islamic state. This invasion is driven on the one hand by people smugglers and on the other by human rights activists who support everything that weakens the nation state, said Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban. This Western mindset and this activist network is perhaps best represented by George Soros. Mr. Soros told Bloomberg News, "Our plan treats the protection of refugees as the objective and national borders as the obstacle." Mrs. Clinton said on CBS Face the Nation that she wants to boost President Obama's mark of 10,000 Syrian refugees resettled in the United States in 1 year to 65,000, a 500% increase. The Washington Times reported that groups that went to Ferguson, Missouri in 2014 and stirred up anger during protests of the police shooting of unarmed black teenager Michael Brown were funded by one of Mr. Soros's umbrella grant makers. One recipient was the Organization for Black Struggle, which established the Hands Up United Coalition, which helped create protest chant "Hands Up, Don't Shoot." Brown never put his hands up and assaulted a white police officer in the fatal altercation, according to a Justice Department report. Mrs. Clinton is clearly in the corner. She has made statements supporting Black Lives Matter, whose followers call for violence against police officers and scolded police across the board. Let's admit it. There is clear evidence that African Americans are disproportionately killed in police incidents compared to any other group, she said in July. And surely we can all agree that that's deeply wrong and needs to change. And yes, we do need to listen to those who say Black Lives Matter, Mrs. Clinton said. She said during the primary election season, there needs to be a concerted effort to address the systematic racism in our criminal justice system, and that requires very clear agenda for retraining police officers, unquote. The nation's largest police union has endorsed Mr. Trump. Mr. Soros says one of his pet peeves is that the U.S. launches military operations against other nations, yet jealously guards its own self-determination. We are willing to violate the sovereignty of other states in the name of universal principles, but we are unwilling to accept any infringement of our own sovereignty, he wrote in 1999 in the Washington Post. We need new international authority that transcends the sovereignty of states to promote an open society. Mr. Soros castigates the United States for not subjecting its deployed armed service members to international courts. He wrote, "We are willing to drop bombs on others from high altitudes, but we are reluctant to expose our own men to risk. We refuse to submit ourselves to any kind of international governance. We were one of 7 countries that refused to subscribe to the International Criminal Court. The others were China, Iraq, Israel, Libya, Qatar, and Yemen. We do not even pay our dues to the United Nations. This kind of behavior does not lend much legitimacy to our claim to be the world's leader." In her private 2013 speech to Brazilian bankers, Mrs. Clinton said a dream of hers is to establish a hemispheric common market. Presumably, this would be modeled after the European Union, which dictates economic policy to member countries. The U.S. would find itself obliged to follow the dictates of a bureaucracy made up of South and Central America, Mexico, the U.S., and Canada. The mission statement of Mr. Soros' flagship operation, the Open Societies Foundation, is that it works to build vibrant and tolerant democracies whose governments are accountable and open to the participation of all people. One group Mr. Soros helped start with $1 million plus donation was MoveOn.org, which helped organize violent protests at Trump rallies last spring. It celebrated the cancellation of Mr. Trump's Chicago rally in March because of protesters and their attacks on Trump supporters. Mr. Trump and the Republican leaders who support him and his hate-filled rhetoric should be on notice after tonight's events, MoveOn said. To all those who took to the streets of Chicago, we say thank you for standing up and saying enough is enough. To Donald Trump and the GOP, we say welcome to the general election. Mr. Soros adamantly opposed President George W. Bush's war on terrorism. In 2004 book, Blasting the Iraq War, The Bubble of American Supremacy, Mr. Soros described 9/11 attacks this way. Admittedly, the terrorist attack was an historic event in its own right. Hijacking fully loaded airplanes and using them as suicide bombs was an audacious idea, and the extension could not have been more spectacular. The destruction of Twin Towers of the World Trade Center made a symbolic statement that reverberated around the world, and the fact people could watch the event on the television sets endowed it with emotional impact that no terrorist act ever had achieved. Mr. Soros and the Soros Fund Management made his fortune by trading currencies. France indicted him on charges of insider trading in the 1980s and fined him $2.6 billion. France's highest courts upheld his conviction. In Britain, he dumped so many pounds into currency market that the media said he broke the Bank of England. Mrs. Clinton said in 2004, "We need people like George Soros, who is fearless and willing to step up when it counts." Stephen Milroy, publisher of JunkScience.com, said, "If she does win, she won't need Soros or anyone else anymore. She will be Crooked Hillary, unchained and beholden to no one. She may do Soros's bidding, but he's going to have to pay her to do it. she'll serve the left-wing ideological agenda to the extent she needs to maintain her voter base for 2020. But I see her focusing, I see her focus being consolidation of power and money, or money and power. And the last article that I have for you is off of Fox News Politics, and it says calibration error. GOP votes to dim in Illinois County. And this is from Chicago. It says early voting in Illinois got off to a rocky start Monday as votes being cast for Republican candidates were transformed into votes for Democrats. Republican state representative candidate Jim Moynihan went to vote on Monday at the Skamsburg Public Library. I tried to cast a vote for myself, and instead it cast a vote for my opponent, Moynihan said. You could imagine my surprise, as the same thing happened with a number of races when I tried to vote for a Republican and the machine registered a vote for a Democrat. The conservative website Illinois Review reported that while using touchscreen voting machines in Skamsburg, Moynihan voted for several races on the ballot, only to find that whenever he voted for a Republican candidate, the machine registered to vote for a Democrat in the same race. He notified the election judge at his polling place and demonstrated that it continued to cast a vote for the opposing candidate's party. Moynihan was eventually allowed to vote for Republican candidates, including his own race. Moynihan offered his gracious lesson to his followers on Twitter. Be careful when you vote in Illinois. Make sure you take the time to check your votes before submitting. Cook County Board of Elections Deputy Communications Director Jim Schultze told Illinois Watchdog the machine was taken out of service and tested. This was a calibration error of the touchscreen on the machines, Schatzky said. When Mr. Moynihan used the touchscreen, it improperly assigned his votes due to improper calibration. So when you go to vote, if you have not voted in early elections or you're voting by mail or whatever, if you go to the polls to vote, be sure that your vote is being cast the way you want it to be cast, because obviously these machines could have been tampered with, or whatever their issue is, but make sure that your vote is going where you want your vote to go, and if not, make some noise about it. And with that, we'll close her down, and I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, give it a thumbs up, share it around, let people know what we're talking about here. Bye.